When I asked the theme of this particular season in the life of the chapel, I was told that it was lessons I learned which did not come from a book. I want to say at the beginning that this is not all that I've learned, what I want to share with you this evening. It's not given in a priority ranking. It's not just unique to myself, the things that I've learned, because I expect that you will resonate with a lot of what I will share with you. But what I have discovered as I went back through these things that I want to share with you this evening is that many of them are found in many a book. And I think all of them are found in the book that we call the Word of God. The book that has come to mean so much to those of us who claim the name of Jesus. So I have done an exercise over these last few days which is quite different for me in that I've not prepared what I would call a traditional message. But I have prepared a number of points to which I'm about to speak that are not necessarily a sermon, but rather an inside view of something of my own life journey. I was thinking as you were singing, and we were singing together, "It is well," that a mentor of mine said, at the end of your life, you hope that you will be able to say, God has done well by me. And I would say, whether you are just starting in life, or whether you have some gray hairs, or fewer than I have at the moment, whatever the case may be, this evening I hope you can say, it is well. It is well with me. And I would say at the beginning of what I want to share with you, it is well with me. And I'm grateful for the life that God has given to me thus far and for all that is yet to be. And I want to share with you some things that are in some ways of chronological order. And I want to begin with the first lesson that I've learned, which did not come from a book, and that is, listen to the voice of experience. I remember on a Sunday evening, I suppose much like this, except it was in the late spring of the year, when I went with my father and mother to church, except that my father dropped my mother off at church and said, we'll pick you up a little later. And my father had some business he wished to attend to with a man in our little community on the south shore of Nova Scotia, on Route 8. If you travel fast between Liverpool and Caledonia, you'll miss Middlefield completely. You'll see a few houses along the sides of the road. That's where I grew up, in this little tiny rural community. The church there is closed. The little one-room schoolhouse is closed. The little country store is closed. Just a few houses along Route 8. After my father dropped me off, he went to visit with a man in our community that he had some business to attend to. We did the business outside the home around the wood pile. I was fascinated with the axe that was standing there beside the chopping block. And my father kept turning over to me at 10 saying, Harry, leave the axe alone. You know where this is going. But I thought it would be kind of fun to whittle away at the side of the chopping block. The only problem was that my left leg decided that it got in the way on the way down. And I went over to my father, who was in great conversation with this man from the community. I said, Dad, just a moment, he said. And I said, Dad. And then finally he looked at me and said, you didn't listen, did you? I said, no, I didn't. And that meant a trip out country, as we called it, toward Caledonia, to the village doctor, and some probably 12 stitches. And a scar that I still have. I was thinking today, listen to the voice of experience. Why do we have to always experience something ourselves when there have been other people who've gone on before us who could tell us well to avoid trouble? And yet sometimes being inquisitive does not always pay off. So I would say to all of us who are here this evening, There are people who know better than we do about a lot of things. Why don't we listen to the people who've been trained well, who have had good experience, who know better than we do about so many things? So I say, as I start this evening, Harry, you say you've learned a lesson? Keep learning. Listen to the voice of experience. I had the pleasure of growing up in a home full of fun. It was a home with a great sense of humor. My father and mother had been married before, had families, spouses died, and my father married my mother, or my mother married my father, however you wish to say it. And I think I came along as a bit of a surprise. My dad was almost 57 and my mother almost 43. My father's father had fought in the First World War. They both knew their share of difficulty and struggle. They knew what life was about, but they had the amazing sense of welcoming people into our home. Our home was a place of humor and a place of hospitality. And so a lesson that I have learned is have a sense of humor. If by chance you can turn some things into just a smile, it will go a long ways with you. Have a sense of humor. And be people of hospitality. Now, some people are naturally gifted with hospitality and seem to be able to open their home easily, while other people are not quite as gifted with hospitality. But I'll tell you what I've learned about hospitality. Hospitality is not about a place. It's not about your home. It's about being the kind of people that welcomes another person into your life, into the very essence of who you are. Some of us are as if the blinds are down, and we don't welcome people into our lives. We're cautious. We're very careful. Others of us have learned how the gift of hospitality can give great encouragement to other people. I'm told that my mother's father was the village blacksmith in the little community of Greenfield. All I have is a faint memory of visiting that blacksmith shop, and the memory is of the smell of the place. It's an amazing smell to be in a blacksmith shop. But what I was told was that my mother said that her mother never knew how many people were going to be at the lunch table that day, because whoever was in the village the blacksmith shop, would be at the table. And I think what I learned as I watched my mom and dad through the many years, it didn't matter if there was someone who had car difficulty along that little Route 8 between Liverpool and Caledonia, and if you blink 3 times, you're going to miss all the houses. There's not much in between there, so if there was a car broke down, it was always go to the gardeners, they'll help you. And my father was a bit of a jack of all trades, and we had more people coming and going from our home growing up. And it was always a question at the table. Well, tell us about what's happening in your life these days. So I've learned it's good to ask people what's happening in their lives rather than being always the kind of person to want to tell other people what's going on in your own. Make space for people. They matter. Another lesson that I've learned is that encouragement is a much better motivator to bring out the best in other people. I shared with Dr. Jansen, who's here this evening, a few days ago, about my primary teacher. Growing up as I did on that rural area, remember, between Liverpool and Caledonia on Route 8, where if you blink 3 times, you'll miss the houses. The teacher came from Greenfield, and you know how she came to teach in Middlefield? She would come up on the mail. Yes, believe it or not, in those days, you could actually get a ride on what was known as the mail. Because in rural delivery, you could, not the stagecoach, the mail. I'm not that old. So, you could get a ride. So she would come up to my father's house and my mom's house, And my dad at the appropriate time, and she would always be there as I would be having my breakfast, sort of supervising, well, are you eating well? Are you eating healthy? I don't know, looking back on it. My mother and dad must have been very hospitable. But I loved Mrs. Freeman. And I would say to her, I'm coming to school. And at the age of 4, on a spring day in April, I said to her, I'm coming to school. And she said, yes, in the fall you'll come to school. With my father outside and my mother in the house, and each thinking I was with them, I walked to the school. It was a half a mile through the woods, not on a rainstorm or a snowstorm, and no fiddle is out to tell you all about it, but it was a country road, probably about a half a mile, and I knocked on the one-room schoolhouse door, and I said, when the teacher came, and she sort of looked this way, and then she looked down, and she said, Harry Gardner, what are you doing here? I said, I told you I was coming to school. She said, come on in. And she got one of the boys who was in probably grade 8 or 9 to tend the rest of them, and she had to walk me home because Dad was the one who drove her, you will remember. She said, I see no reason why he cannot come for half days. My mother said, do you think? She said, yes, I think he's ready. So at the age of 4 that spring, I went to school. With the word was, if Mrs. Ritzy, who was the superintendent, came, you will hide in the cupboard because you are not supposed to be here. Many years passed after those hiding in the cupboard days when Mrs. Ritzy would attend, and we would listen, they would pronounce their French, and I would peek out through the crack thinking, oh my goodness, how long is she staying today? Any case, many years passed, and Mrs. Ritzy remarried the undertaker from Liverpool, and I was their pastor. And I went to see them in their home, and I said to her, there's something I should tell you. I said, I remember when I used to hide in the cupboard, and you would come to visit the school. She said, do you think I didn't know you were in the cupboard? I love Mrs. Freeman. Mrs. Freeman encouraged me. There was a globe that sat on her desk, and the desk of the one-room school just was elevated just a bit. And the globe was there, and she would spin it just a little bit, and she'd say, Harry, where do you want to go in the world? You can do anything you want to. You're gifted. You can read. You write well. I'll teach you what I can. And through the years, Mrs. Freeman followed my early career. And I was at Dalhousie, I remember, studying at, I don't know, can we say Dalhousie University here? And I learned of Mrs. Freeman having a car accident and the many weeks of rehabilitation in the hospital in Halifax. And I would go pretty much every day after classes. And finally she said to me, Harry, you have better things to do with your time than to stop here and see me every day. And I said, well, when I was 4 and 5, you spent every day of my school year spending time with me. And many years passed, she got better, and then passed away, and I had the privilege of speaking in her honor. And the first thing I said was this: I loved Mrs. Freeman, and Mrs. Freeman loved me. Some of you may be studying to be teachers. Some of you have influence that you rarely stop and think about having. Your motivation of others and my motivation of others by encouragement is the best motivator to bring the best out of other people. Invest in others because others have invested in you. Another lesson that I learned was take responsibility for what is yours to do. What is yours to do tonight? Well, let me tell you about being a teenager back in Middlefield and Greenfield. You remember the road that goes between Liverpool and Caledonia? And if you travel really fast, you'll miss the houses along the road. Yes, you got it. I don't know how I got this particular job, but my last name is Gardner, and I became a gardener. I became a junior groundskeeper to a very wealthy man, a very gifted man, a concert pianist who retired with his wife in this beautiful area in Greenfield at the head of the lake. It's an absolutely beautiful property. There were 3 cascading rose gardens that I tended, along with all kinds of other gardens, and 2 greenhouses. I loved Mr. Emerson. I loved getting done early and listening to him practice, as he called it, well into his 70s, every day, 6 hours at the piano, some of the most beautiful, beautiful pieces that would be played. And then we would listen to opera. We had an amazing relationship. He brought me to Acadia University as probably a 17-year-old. Some of you may remember when the Red Army came. I said to Gail today, I thought it was across the street, but it probably was here at University Hall. I remember, you can imagine a 17-year-old from Middlefield, on Route 8, you got it, being brought across to Acadia and the influence of what that was all about. Mr. Emerson went on a trip, and he said, now, this is what is yours to do while I'm gone. You must mow the lawns. I said, of course. You have to water the flowers in 2 conservatories. I said, of course. You have to make sure that the roses are weeded. Absolutely, no problem. But there was a senior groundskeeper who didn't like to know that possibly his days of being the senior groundskeeper might be over with the junior groundskeeper. And when I would check in with the senior who had the key to all things, he'd say, I've taken care of the grass. I have wed through the roses. 2 weeks passed, and the owner came home. It sounds very much like a Bible story. The owner came home, and nothing had been done. And I received a phone call, and never the opportunity for an explanation. And a relationship was severed without ever another word. Take responsibility for what is yours to do. And if you give it away, check in to make sure that it is done. And those of you who work with me, and there are some here tonight, will probably say, that explains a lot. Another lesson that I learned in my teen years, and then it took a lot more decades to learn this one, is that tragedy does not need to triumph. Growing up in that small rural community without full brothers or sisters, I had a best friend, and we did almost everything together, from getting measles together to falling off bicycles together, swimming, skating, coasting, singing together, fishing together, everything together. And then the unthinkable happened. As I was graduating high school at the age of 17, on an August evening, when the air was thick with humidity and warmth, he was killed in a car wreck. The driver was a schoolmate, and alcohol was involved. The unthinkable happened in my life. And when his parents could not go to the funeral home because of grief, it was my father who took me and my best friend's sister to begin to make arrangements, something a 17-year-old probably shouldn't ever have to do. The sister of this friend of mine became and is today an ordained Presbyterian minister. I'll tell you something I've learned, and it took decades to learn this one. The same God that I would at first shake my fist at is the same God who alone can bring comfort. And that the things of life that bring pain like that are not caused by him. That takes time to learn. Alcohol and human error must not be dismissed when it comes to cause and effect. In Dalhousie University, I chased study of sociology and psychology and philosophy of world religions, and an undergrad degree there pursued the desire for truth and what made sense in this world. And looking back, I have learned that it was the hound of heaven, referred to by Francis Thompson, who was chasing after me, lovingly watching over my steps, until I was introduced to the resurrected Jesus, and like Augustine of old, I could say, my heart is restless until it finds its rest in thee. How this journey has helped me as a pastor, as I have helped others in their pain and disorientation, in the deep losses of their lives as they have faced the unexplainable, and the learning to sit in silence when there are no words adequate or enough. I have learned that love is the most excellent way. Though stated by the Apostle Paul, I have learned this to be the case. I remember as a young boy hearing about a neighbor woman along Route 8, no, that's okay, who had had her sixth child. I was amazed that she could have her sixth child, and I said to my mother, Mom, where does the love come from for a new baby? Without hesitation, she said to me, oh, Harry, that's an easy one. The love comes right along with the baby. After the death of my closest friend, I did not have the words to express my inner state. But I know that I had decided not to allow myself to ever be hurt like that again. I would just not let anybody else in, and I would never have to hurt that way if there was loss. And then, during Christmas vacation, going to the Liverpool High School to watch a women's basketball game, I watched as a 4'11" sped her way down the basketball court. When I asked who she was, all I was told was that she was home from university, from Dalhousie. I said, oh, she can't be going to university. She looks too young for that. And I decided I was going to meet her. She's here tonight. After almost 43 years of marriage, I'm so glad I did. And as our children have come along, and then eventually a daughter-in-law, and then a son-in-law, and 4 precious grandchildren, the love has come right along with them. Love is the most excellent way. I've learned that relationships are the most important thing in life, and our pastoral ministry has taught us so many life lessons that I could spend the night and the weeks to come telling you all kinds of stories about what people have taught me. But what I have learned is that this love flows from the very essence of God. The God who has revealed himself as a relationship of 3 persons in one being. And I've learned that because God is a relationship of 3 persons in one being, he desires for us to be in relationship. For Gail and for me, our travels have taught us so much as well. We have been privileged to travel among the peoples of the world. And I have learned that people everywhere bear the image of God and should be highly valued. One last thing. It is really important, if you haven't caught it in my voice. It is super important to have fun. I was a very serious divinity student when I started here at Acadia Divinity College. And then something happened. I was introduced to ministry on the North Mountain, north of Berwick, a little community called Burlington. And through the people there, we were loved into pastoral ministry. You see, I fell in love with Jesus Christ when I was convinced of his resurrection. I thought, I want to get to know this guy. However, I wasn't so sure I liked his church. Because in the little community that I grew up on between Liverpool and Caledonia, there were really only little old ladies and little children who went to church. And I have come to see the world over that people of all ages have found in Christ great life and in his church. But it was the little community of Burlington where we still have a summer place. I learned among these mountain people, many of them farmers, I learned patience, dedication. I watched them and participated with them in hard work. I captured something of their wisdom in the ordinary and got involved with fishing trips, skidoo rides, and now, are you ready for this? We have a four-wheeler. Yep, we do. And I would tell you about the four-wheeler, it literally keeps me grounded. Friends, there continues to be losses, and tears flow. But I'll tell you this, if you're going to love, and you must, there will be losses. And your heart will break. And so it should. But it won't break in two. Because in Christ Jesus I have learned that it is him, who has the final word. And his final word is life and not death. It's a word of hope and not despair. It is a word of love and not loneliness. It is, in fact, a word that says this crazy world that seems out of control is actually held in his hands and will not be left without his ultimate judgment. I have learned to unabashedly, unashamedly, with enthusiasm, with boldness, with love and gentleness and great respect, recommend to all persons everywhere Jesus.